The official release of the new World Bank diagnostic on Belize took place today at the Radisson Fort George Hotel and touched on several issues, including poverty, employment, economy, growth, sustainability issues, public debt, and ecosystems, among others. While the official document came out today, there was an embargoed media briefing yesterday where presentations were made by Sophia Certain, the World Bank Country Director for the Caribbean, and Francisco Carneiro, who is the bank's lead economist for the Caribbean. Certain started the presentation with a synopsis of what the report contains.
If you want an analysis, a deep and broad analysis of key obstacles and opportunities present in a country in terms of reducing poverty, increasing prosperity, boosting growth. So we're really looking at helping the government with further analysis and details on what can really make a difference for a country. And this obviously has served as input into the National Development Strategy, and importantly, will also serve as the basis on which we'll define our future engagement with Belize, the future program priorities of the World Bank program in Belize. And as you will hear from the presentation, the concerns that we will try to help find solutions to in Belize are manifold. And in general, you're well aware that GDP per capita has stagnated a lot over the last many years, over the last decade. Unemployment is high, higher than in the rest of Latin America. Poverty, we don't have much data on poverty, but the data we have shows an increase, at least the last count in 2009 shows an increase compared to the previous count in 2002. And with the stagnation in income per capita, it probably has continued to increase. You're very vulnerable to shocks in many ways. Crime and violence is a big issue. Yet, you will see that the main conclusion of the report is that the future can be bright. There are many opportunities and hopes and policies that the government can put in place to change the prospects and make them better for the population and the economy.
Economist Carneiro presented on key sectors, with one of them being unemployment and production, where he spoke of the culture of locals when it comes to jobs.
There are three important domestic features that are very critical for the future of Belize. One is the size of its public sector debt, which is currently at 75% of GDP. Number two is the high unemployment rate that you see in this country in spite of a very strong inflow of migrants. And number three is the low levels of savings and investments in spite of very high FDI. Most of the jobs in Belize are located in the service sector. Most of the people here work like you in the service sector, providing services for other businesses. And importantly, the unemployment rate is very high in Belize compared to other countries in the region and in the world. You see from the chart on the right that unemployment increased from around 8% right before the global financial crisis, and it kept increasing until recently, and today it's between 10 and 14%, which is high, especially for a country which has a lot of migrants coming into the country. Because if you consider the fact that the economy needs to import labor, import workers to continue operation, you would imagine a country that has a lot of jobs to offer. And with a country that has this kind of characteristics, the unemployment rate should be expected to be low. But that's not happening here in Belize. So there is something behind this behavior of the labor market that is a little bit puzzling. And what we did in the report was to look at the causes that could explain this situation. And one possible explanation, we are not sure because we don't have a lot of the data that would allow us to arrive at a very definitive conclusion, but one possible explanation is that the migrants are actually taking up the jobs that the young Belizeans don't want to take, because the jobs are for people with low skills, low payment, and the migrants are willing to work at a lower wage rate. and therefore the local Belizeans prefer to remain unemployed. The question is, from the economic point of view, is why would they do this? Don't they need the income? And then another thing that could help explain this is perhaps the fact that people who migrate out of Belize send remittances back that support this kind of behavior.
With limited information available on the poverty rate in Belize, Carneiro spoke on the last statistics that showed a rise in poverty.
When we look at the data available that allows us to see or to have a measure of the size of poverty in Belize, as Sophie mentioned in the beginning, what we can say for sure is that there was an increase in poverty between 2002 and 2009. Those are the only data points that we have in terms of poverty rates. We don't know what poverty is right now. It might have increased, it might have decreased, we don't know. But what we know is that during the years in which Latin America as a region was observing a downward trend in poverty, as you can see in the right-hand side diagram here, with the blue line coming down, Belize was on the opposite direction. Poverty was increasing in Belize when it was actually decreasing in the rest of the region. So what are the reasons behind this behavior in terms of poverty performance? Another important feature of Belize is that poverty is, there is a lot of spatial difference in the incidence of poverty across regions in Belize. So you see here in these two charts that poverty is much higher in the districts of Corozal and Toledo, for example. And it's very low in Belize City compared to the rest of the region, right? So this is also important because it helps to identify where most of the vulnerabilities, most of the social vulnerabilities are.
As it relates to the factors that hinder and the ones that aid in the growth of Belize's economy, Carneiro says there was a lot of volatility in the growth rate.
That some of the main issues that we have identified include a stagnant income per capita in the country, probably associated with the very low level of productivity. And you see that weaknesses in the investment climate that are manifested in different ways, in different forms, also help to explain the growth performance of the country. And most importantly, vulnerabilities in the financial sector. But let's look at the growth rates over time. A very important feature of the growth performance of Belize is that it is characterized by a lot of volatility, what we call a stop-and-go pattern. If you look at the dotted red line, here for example, you see that there are lots of spikes in the growth trajectory of Belize over time. And this is since 1980, since the country became independent. A lot of volatility. That's what economists call volatility, up and down. Up one year, then down the next year, and then the following year up again, and then next year, for no reason, apparently, it goes down. So this is an important feature because it creates a lot of challenges for economic policymakers. And another very interesting and puzzling finding is that if you look at the solid black line, which measures the income per capita, or the total amount of goods and services produced in the country divided by the number of the population, it increased quite a lot since independence, actually more than doubled up to the year 2000. But since then, it's flat, completely stagnated, not increasing. Why is that? We believe that this outcome actually might have contributed for an increase in poverty. Because if the economy is not generating enough wealth to provide more to the existing population, and you had a big shock during the global financial crisis, and you are now facing a situation where commodity prices are low and Belize exports a commodity, so you are facing a situation of scarcity, so to speak, probably that might have had an impact on poverty. But we are not sure because we don't have the data. Only when you are able to look at the in detail what happened to the household incomes of Belizeans, you will be able to say something about poverty.
With much more analysis documented on Belize's diagnostics report by the World Bank, we will have more on the report in our future newscasts.